Mori, Yokwe, Kiorana, Whakalofa lahi atu, you're right no more, Maloni, and greetings from the sacred languages of our forebears. Present here this evening, representing our UU204 I-Talitali team, are Ms. Nasama, there in the corner, Ms. Lalita and I. We also have our colleague Rosie, who will be joining us a bit later in this session. We also would like to acknowledge our course coordinator, Dr. Yara Halkenberg, and our two other colleagues, Tima and Mother, that are present with us here this afternoon. What our colleagues are doing, they're distributing the flags of Kuta. That is what we will be talking about in our weaving presentation this afternoon. So you're not just given the Kuta for you to just have a look at. We also would like to ask you to do something about it. Just as we are comparing research to the metaphor of weaving, we also would like to kindly request you to weave something while you're listening to our presentation. And we're also distributing our very basic rubric that we would like to get feedback from you. And we know that not everyone is able to ask questions to give feedback at the end of the session. So that rubric that we've distributed is for you to make your notes, your comments, your critique, and we will collect both your woven mat, Kuta mat, and the rubric with your comments in it at the end of this session. One of the major challenges of higher education today is to incorporate the research component into our courses. And this is a challenge that we at the UU204 team, we recognize. And what RSD is also trying to meet this need for it to be incorporated into our assessment rubrics. Now, at UU204 is a generic course with the aim of teaching our students specific consciousness. It's a compulsory course at 200 level, and it encourages deeper and reflective learning. This is done with the inclusion of our 12 nations with their rich cultural and diverse backgrounds, and their cultural and diverse background is acknowledged, and we draw upon this rich and diverse cultural background to capture that Pacific consciousness that our students are encouraged to delve deeper into their own culture and their own background, and through that, they also develop their critical research and education. The weaving metaphor that our team is proposing is a conceptual model that builds on the RSD with a Pacific approach. This conceptual model is in the form of the I-Talitali rubric. As I mentioned earlier, there's a very basic rubric that we're distributing, and we would be very happy to hear from you on how we can improve that or your critique. We will be collecting that at the end of this session. Research on learning and teaching in developing countries, they fervently support the idea that context matters. Not having enough understanding of the local pedagogical learning environment could be one of the reasons for the failure of many well-intentioned imported interventions. In recognition of the Pacific learning context, the UU204 team has proposed the I-Talitali rubric, which you have in front of you. This rubric infuses the Pacific research skills development framework. The I-Talitali approach is a Pacific model, weaving a mat. It's a metaphor that also teaches research skills. It moves from the abstract to complex ideas, and it draws on the familiar Pacific cultural process of mat weaving. The facets of the I-Talitali research framework are illustrated in the figure that is there on the screen. What we have tried to do in this figure is to we've incorporated Fijian or Itauke words to go along with the 6 facets of the RSD framework. For the first, embark and clarify, we have selected the term Ndingitaka. For the second, find and generate, is Wakasangangara. Evaluate and reflect, Wakasokomuna Matau. For organize and manage, it's Tuvana. For analyze and synthesize, Talitali. And for communicate and apply, Sevutakinayimbe. I'm sorry for that, there's a slight spelling error about that, sorry about that. But those are Fijian words that we have adopted to contextualize, or perhaps to Fijianize, the RSD framework. I know that there's been discussions about our students having a problem with the English language. So our response to that is to provide from our familiar Fijian background, the Fijian words that can go along with the RST framework, and others can build on this. They can take that and use it in their own context from the country, the 12-member countries that they come from, and insert their own terms there, as they see fit. Now, on step 1, on embark and clarify, this particular facet, it deals with understanding the assignment question and knowing where to access the information that's needed to be able to answer that assessment question. The raw material that we have chosen is called the kuta. It's found in inland communities such as Mbua, in marshy ponds. That's where they grow. It's also called kuta in the Maori language. Now, for Maori weavers of kuta, in their mind, they have a mind map of their resource areas. Weavers in Northland of Maori, they maintain in their mind knowledge of all the resource areas that they have in their area. And so for each particular year, before the harvest period, they know which particular pond that they will go and harvest from. That's the knowledge that they maintain in their mind at all times. Now, how does that relate to our students and RSD? For our students, it's important for them to be up to date and to be knowledgeable about the latest research findings and developments in their area of research. It's not enough for them to just sit and be passive learners. They need to be out there reading the journals, reading relevant articles about what is new, okay, what are the latest findings, what does the latest research say in their field of study. It's a student's responsibility to be aware of that. Students, just like Maori weavers, they need to have a mind map of their resources. Another example that we've put out there is to attend workshops organized by the library, IRS workshops, because that will enable them to identify which websites, which online databases is relevant for their area of study. Harvesting kuta is not an easy task, it's a tough task. In fact, for weavers from Maduata, they walk 3 hours to the lake and 3 hours back. And when they come back, they carry kuta on their back, vertically. Now, how does that relate to our students? Our students need to have a realistic understanding of the tough process involved in gathering information from online databases, libraries, and other credible sources. It can be an overnight job. You know, sometimes we have students emailing us, I am so disappointed with my mark, can you do something about it? Because I stayed up the whole night, the night before it was due, working on it. No, but that does not show someone that appreciates the tough process in collecting, thinking about information, being able to analyze and synthesize. And so that's what we compare to the task of harvesting raw materials. For find and generate, selecting suitable materials for weaving, in these particular steps, wakasankangara, searching for the material, selecting the material. For students, it's the process of finding and selecting the information needed to write a good quality paper. The women weavers of Maduata, when they describe the process of selecting the kuta that they use for weaving, it's not just any kuta plant that's growing there. Once they reach their resource area, they select the green kuta stalk. No red spots, no flowers. You must hold the stalk a certain way, okay? And you must feel the stalk with your hand, separate it from the other kuta plants, move your hand to the root, gently pull it out of the water. One by one, the harvested kuta stalks are laid out. Now, you can see that for the weavers, harvesting kuta, you need to be knowledgeable about which kuta is mature enough, even how you pull it out of the water, how you lay it on the ground while you complete the harvesting process. Similarly, for our students, students need to allocate enough time, okay, for their minds to absorb the new information. They must know where to extract the right information from. They must learn how to give their minds enough time to integrate old, new information with the old information they have to be able to synthesize well, to be able to analyze well. Now, once kuta is harvested, it's carried vertically back to the village. You can't carry it horizontally, it's going to break, and you won't be able to weave a good mat. The weavers, they wrap the kuta in mats. In the Maori culture, they wrap it for 3 days. In Fiji, it's 4 days and 4 nights. It's wrapped so that there's no breeze that's to touch them. And the process of wrapping the kuta gives them their golden brown color. Okay, when you see the mat, the kuta mat, it's golden brown. It didn't turn green to brown automatically. They had to wrap it in old mats. In the same way, the mind is an incubator, and students need to give themselves time to let new information integrate successfully with the old information they have already. So this is just a few illustrations. This first one here, this is the resource area where you have a kuta. This is a kuta harvester. He's selecting which kuta flags to cut. These are the women. Notice the way that they carry the kuta. It has to be carried that way. Otherwise it's going to break. And you'll waste all the time you spent laboring for it. Here's the kuta. They put it out in the sun after having wrapped them. And here is the finished product. Now I'm going to give this time over to my colleague, Ms. Nasama, to continue.
Thank you, Joka. Okay, I'll take you through the rubric, which is step 3 of the RST framework and the I-Talitali framework. During the introduction, Joka already showed you our conceptual framework, a very colorful diagram. You have seen that it is a cyclic diagram, and therefore, from that framework, we developed our rubric that is in front of you. So step 3, evaluate and reflect. In the weaving metaphor, or weaving the mat, we select, or the weavers select rather, strong and durable raw materials. Because the strong materials will give or build a strong foundation for the mat. It will also ensure it will also give confidence to the weavers. Similarly, in the RST framework, students extract information from data sources that can be trusted. They have to evaluate the data from the various sources, and we always tell them to extract the data or extract information from credible sources. And they have student tips folder on Moodle that has information on what credible data sources mean. So they read about that on the Moodle. The relevant they have a lot of information because when we give an assignment question to our students, the first thing they do is they go and search for it on the internet. And they get a lot of information. But what do you do with that information? Similarly, when we go to the library, we just pick any book that is somewhat related to the question or to our research. And we pick as many books as possible so that we look confident, oh, we have got a lot of information here. But what do we do with that information? How do we manage that information? What is relevant to our question? We only extract that. So, information that they can extract that will give meaning and understanding of the question. And as in the RST, it says there cites credible sources. So we mark students who cite credible sources, paper that includes personal reflection, and paper that includes oral history. All those are information or relevant information. I'll quickly take you to the next slide. Step 4, which is organize and manage. In the weaving metaphor or weaving the mat, organize the material for weaving in a very logical manner, as Joka has showed you the diagram where the kuta has been laid on the ground according to the height and or length and thickness. Also, the weavers select wool according to the design. They select the color of the wool according to the design or to the pattern, and it has to be consistent throughout the mat. Similarly, in RST framework, how do students manage that information? How do they arrange the information so that there is a logical flow of ideas, and is the information selected as per their mind map or as per their conceptual framework or as per their plan, as per the paragraph? How do they connect and relate it to the topic question? Are the ideas organized in a logical manner? And also they can use pictures or images to illustrate their ideas. As the Chinese proverb says, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So we do allow students to use images or pictures in their writing. And once they have written their paragraph, it's not the end. They have to phrase and rephrase. They have to weave and reweave so that it makes sense, or so that all the information fits together very well to give meaning to that paragraph. Thank you. Now I give to my next colleague.
Thank you, Naz. I'll be talking about the next component, which is analyze and synthesize. I-Talitali, that's our indigenous word for it. It incorporates and critically discusses the relevant literature and data collected from various sources. So we have weaved our mat according to a pattern that has been in our mind, and we'll have a look at one of the mats. That's one of the mat that has been weaved. It is from Marshall Islands. You see in this mat, our finished product, this is a finished product. The mat brings together a whole set of expression. There's an expression in it. It's not only weaving. So there is a pattern. There are colors in it. There is a design. And it is neat. It has got no loose ends. These are all decoration frills. And this finished product tells us a story. And this mat, it is a thank you mat. It was given to me, some of you have already seen it, in Marshall Islands while I was doing a summer school. They were weaving a mat for me. So you see the value of mat in the Pacific. And that is why I see the relevance of mat weaving in our rubric, which is very much, our students of the Pacific are very much familiar with. Similarly, this is what is expected in a research paper. There should be a structure, a pattern, cohesion between paragraphs, and a flow with critical ideas telling a story. And the next step, which is communication and apply, sebutaki ni imbe. The final section of this rubric, communicate and apply sebutaki ni imbe, is about tidying up. For example, cutting off the loose strands. In relation to RST, it would mean to check the word limit, spelling and grammar, syntax and the use of correct English, since we use English for our assignments, and we'll look at the consistency in the referencing style. There must be in-text referencing. If you're using APA, US APA or Harvard. So those are some of the things that we look in the last section, step 6 of the communicate and apply. In conclusion, this paper proposes that the I-Talitali framework rubric has the potential to enhance not only the learning, but also provide better understanding of research-based learning in a Pacific context. Most Pacific communities have Talanoa-based interactions, and our math metaphor opens up a different approach to research and learning with which most of our Pacific Island students are too familiar with. So research for us is like weaving a mat, which will never be lost in the Pacific. There are some programs on TV that our children these days, they are not weaving, but with the tourism coming in, I think it is being revived. So mat weaving will never die out. So I'll hand over to Chukapedi, my colleague. She will.
Okay, thank you, colleagues. So we come to the end of our presentation, and as I mentioned at the beginning, now I would like my colleagues Nancy and Lalita to collect your finished product of Kuta, and as well, if you want, you can scribble some comments for us, ways in which you want to critique our presentation, the content. We welcome it because that's what the whole purpose of this presentation is, to get constructive feedback from you. If we also want to give you the opportunity, if any of you would like to talk a little about your woven product, what it means to you, how do you see it as relating to the RSD rubric in our Pacific context, please feel free to just raise your hand and talk about your finished product before you hand it back to us. Thank you.